Welcome to your company safety orientation. We are going to cover the following orientation topics: safety policies and procedures, worker rights and responsibilities, hazards and controls, near misses and incident reporting, emergency response, regulatory requirements, and personal protective equipment. Safety policies and procedures. All of the information reviewed in this safety orientation can be found in your company's health and safety program. Talk to your supervisor or management for the location of these documents. The safety policy can be found in the front of the health and safety program. It covers the company's commitment to safety, responsibilities for safety, and is reviewed and signed off on by senior management. Disciplinary policy. Employees who do not comply with the established rules may be subject to fair and corrective disciplinary actions. The following four-step process will be followed. Verbal warning. Whenever possible, the supervisor will attempt to correct the behavior or conduct with an informal discussion and a verbal warning. Written warning. Unsatisfactory conduct or continued poor performance which is considered to be serious enough to be recorded in the employee's file, but not serious enough to warrant suspension or dismissal, shall result in a performance improvement discussion, which will be documented. Suspension. Depending on the severity of the infraction, an unpaid suspension may be imposed. Dismissal. Continued employee infractions and or failure to address the behaviors or performance outlined in steps above may result in termination. These instances are referred to as just cause dismissal, in which case no severance or pay in lieu of notice is granted to the employee. Depending on the severity of the incident, violation, or behavior, any of the progressive steps may be bypassed and result in immediate termination. Violence and harassment. Violence and harassment can take place at any worksite and may range from disrespectful remarks to physical aggression. Addressing issues early on can prevent acts of bullying and harassment from progressing to acts of physical violence. Violence in the workplace could put a worker at risk of physical or psychological harm. Workplace harassment is a behavior intended to intimidate, offend, degrade, or humiliate a particular person or group. Worker rights and responsibilities. Safety responsibilities. Senior management responsibilities. Ensure the workplace is safe. Train employees about potential hazards and applicable controls. Make sure workers know how to use and handle equipment safely and properly. Make sure workers use any necessary personal protective equipment, and immediately report all critical injuries. Management and supervisor responsibilities. Make sure workers work in compliance with OH&S acts and regulations. Make sure that workers use required protective equipment and/or devices for their work tasks. Advise workers of potential and actual hazards. Provide workers with written instructions as to the measures and procedures to be taken for protection of the worker. And take every reasonable precaution in the circumstances for the protection of workers. Worker responsibilities. Work in compliance with OH&S acts and regulations. Use personal protective equipment and clothing as directed by the company for the work tasks being performed. Report workplace hazards, incidents, and dangers to your supervisor or employer. Work in a safe manner as required by the company and use the required safety equipment. Tell the supervisor or employer about any missing or defective equipment or protective devices that may be dangerous. Worker rights and responsibilities. There are three basic rights for workers under occupational health and safety legislation: the right to know the hazards at work and how to control them, the right to participate in finding and controlling workplace hazards, and the right to refuse work that you believe is unusually dangerous or imminent danger. Hazards and controls. What is a hazard? Hazards are anything in the workplace that could potentially cause harm to people, property, or the environment. They can be physical, chemical, biological, ergonomic, or psychological. They could include things like loud noises, repetitive movements, sun exposure, chemical exposure, falling objects, slippery surfaces, sharp equipment, and icy roads. What is a control? Controls are measures put in place to either eliminate a hazard or reduce the risk associated with it. Controls can be categorized into different levels. Elimination. Removing the hazard altogether, such as replacing a toxic chemical with a non-toxic one. Substitution. Swapping one material or process with another that's less hazardous. Engineering controls. Implementing physical changes like installing guards on machinery. Administrative controls. Changing the way people work, such as scheduling regular breaks. Personal protective equipment. Providing protective clothing and equipment as a last line of defense. Examples of controls. Engineering controls. Installing physical barriers to protect those working alone, using equipment guards, use of a forklift to lift heavy loads, and ensuring proper ventilation. Administrative controls. Conduct a site-specific hazard assessment, develop safe work practices and procedures, provide training and supervision to workers, limit exposure time by rotating jobs, and display warning signs. PPE controls or personal protective equipment. Approved footwear, safety glasses, respirators, protective gloves, and reflective vests. Site-specific hazard assessment. Site-specific hazard assessments check for hazards before work starts and where conditions change or when non-routine work is added. When workers travel to different work sites to perform work, a site-specific hazard assessment must be completed. Site-specific hazard assessments flag hazards identified at the location, for example, poor lighting, wet surfaces, and extreme temperatures, or introduced by a change at the work site, for example, unfamiliar chemicals, and introduction of new equipment. Site-specific hazard assessments also check to confirm that existing controls are in place, for example, railings, equipment guards, and personal protective equipment. Any hazards identified are to be eliminated or controlled right away, before the work starts or continues. Here's an example of a completed field-level hazard assessment or site-specific hazard assessment. You can list different things like the work that's being completed, the date, task location, muster point, permit job number if applicable, PPE inspection, and some instructions. You will start by listing your job tasks, then move on to the hazards applicable to those tasks. Use a priority rating of how risky it is to complete that task, and list any plans to eliminate or control the risk. So for example, you can see that the first task is arriving at site with hazards consisting of multiple vehicles entering and exiting, priority of a 3C, and plans to eliminate of administrative controls where the work area is to be cordoned off with pylons and staff to be made aware of the hazards and to wear high visibility vests. Hazard, near miss, and incident reporting. As a worker, you are responsible for reporting to your employer or supervisor your concerns about any unsafe or harmful worksite conditions. This includes reporting all hazards, near misses, incidents, and occupational illnesses. Incident reporting. All incidents, injuries, and illnesses, including occupational and non-occupational, must be reported to your direct supervisor regardless of severity. Incidents must be reported immediately, but why? It's to ensure that immediate attention to injuries happens, that incident investigations can be started and appropriate parties notified, so causes of the incident are identified to help prevent similar incidents in the future. Meaningful statistical data on incidents and their costs can be compiled. What to report. It is vital to promptly report incidents that have the potential to cause harm. Understanding what to report and following the proper procedures ensures that appropriate action can be taken to prevent further issues and continuously improve our safety measures. Reporting hazards. Hazards are an object or situation that has the potential to harm a person, the environment, or cause damage to property. A near miss is an unplanned event that has the potential to cause, but does not actually result in an injury, damage, or any interruption to normal operation. Reporting injuries. Everything as small as a cut, pulled muscle, or a rolled ankle needs to be reported to a supervisor. First aid is any incident that requires first aid or the use of medical supplies, and it must be reported. Reporting equipment damage. Any incident that results in the damage of equipment or property needs to be reported. Spills or releases. Any time that a hazardous product is spilled or released, it needs to be reported. Work refusal. If you feel work is unsafe, it needs to be reported to your supervisor, and the reason for the refusal must be stated. Occupational illnesses. Any condition that results from the exposure in a workplace to a physical, chemical, or biological agent must be reported. Incident reporting process. Immediate action. Ensure the safety of all involved and provide first aid or medical assistance if needed. Secure the area to prevent further harm. Notify your supervisor. Inform your immediate supervisor or manager as soon as possible. Provide key details about the incident, including what happened, where, when, and who was involved. Document the incident. Complete an incident report form and include all relevant details, such as cause, witnesses, injuries, and any immediate actions taken. Cooperate with investigation. Participate in any follow-up investigation conducted by the company or external authorities by providing accurate and truthful information. Emergency response. Emergency response plan. Emergency response plans have been created for fixed locations, and site-specific ones will be prepared for all work sites that include the following: identification of potential emergencies, procedures for dealing with identified emergencies, the identification of, location of, and operational procedures for emergency equipment, emergency response training requirements, location and use of emergency facilities, fire protection requirements, alarm and emergency communication requirements, first aid services required, procedures for rescue and evacuation, and designated rescue and evacuation workers. Know your role in an emergency, whether it's to alert others, call emergency services, or assist in evacuation. Be prepared to act. There are several different types of emergencies, including fires, medical, natural disasters, hazardous material incidents, security threats, utility failures, environmental spills, transport accidents, and workplace violence. Location of ERP equipment. You will need to familiarize yourself with the locations of fire extinguishers, first aid kits, spill kits, eye wash, and other safety equipment. This information can be found on location maps and by talking to your supervisor. Fire extinguishers. Use the pass method to put out a fire when safe to do so. This includes pulling the pin, aiming the nozzle at the base of the fire, squeezing the lever slowly, and sweeping from side to side. Regulatory requirements. OH&S legislation and regulation. OH&S legislation. Each province and territory has specific regulations and acts that align with the unique needs and industries within their jurisdiction. Make sure you're familiar with the ones applicable to your location. Regulations. These are detailed rules developed to support the implementation of OH&S laws. They outline specific responsibilities and requirements for employers, supervisors, and workers to ensure a safe and healthy workplace. Workers' compensation. WCB is an independent organization in each province and territory that provides support and compensation to workers who are injured on the job. Responsibilities: reporting injuries promptly to WCB, participating in appropriate medical treatment, and cooperating with return to work plans if needed. Personal protective equipment. Personal protective equipment. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, play a crucial role in safeguarding workers from potential risks and hazards in the workplace. PPE may include items like gloves, safety glasses, earplugs, hard hats, respiratory masks, and protective clothing. The specific type and usage of PPE will vary depending on the job tasks and identified risks. It's essential for each worker to understand the importance of using PPE correctly and to be aware of the company's policies regarding when and how to use it. Orientation completion. Excellence in safety and work performance can only be achieved through the commitment and active support of everyone at the company. All levels within the company are responsible and will be held accountable for the overall health, safety, and environmental incentives. We consider the safety and health of our employees of paramount importance and ask all our employees to do their utmost in working towards a safe and healthy work environment so that everyone makes it home safe each and every day. Remember to always use a questioning attitude, and we hope that you will share our commitment to safety.